Hey, it's me. It's been a long time since I have done some kind of recording. I was really hoping to do a live stream today, but unfortunately, my internet decided to not work today. So I haven't done a live stream in in months. And the day that I decided, like, oh, I'm going to go ahead and do a live stream, my internet decided that it didn't want to work. So I thought I'd go ahead and do a little recording with the idea that I'm just going to kind of work in my journal, maybe talk, excuse me, maybe talk about some things as I am working. So anyway, you may have noticed on the title of this video, it says daily practice. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to keep in that routine of working daily. And that started way back in September. So some of you may have joined in for the 30-day challenge that I did in September, where I just sat down and I worked on these little 4-inch by 4-inch pieces of art. And I did that every day, and I live streamed it during the weekdays, and I filmed it during the weekends. And if you missed that series, you can go back and watch it on Facebook, or you can check out my YouTube channel for those. But that kind of got the ball rolling. And then I moved into October and I did a monster a day challenge. And then in November, December, and January, I kind of shifted it more to just kind of a daily practice and didn't really have any kind of theme for those months. And my ultimate goal, though, and I don't know if I ever really mentioned this whenever I started everything back in September, was that I was doing a 100-day challenge. And those are kind of, they're really common, and you see that all the time. You see people doing those 100-day art challenges where they try to sit down for 100 straight days and do some kind of art. A lot of times there's themes and things like that. So I wanted to do that myself, but I just knew, like, 100 days, that's a big number. And I just was like, I can't, that's just too big. I needed to chunk it down. So I did a 30-day challenge, and then October was a 31-day challenge, and then November, and it got in like all the way into December. And I really kept at it day after day after day. So I went almost 4 months with making art, and it ended up being like, out of like 125 straight days, I think I missed 1 or 2 days. And so I definitely went above that 100-day mark. And since then, yeah, I've missed a couple days, but and some days I sit and make a lot of art, so it kind of balances out. So the idea is that maybe I'm not making art every single day, but somehow there's a daily practice, sitting down, working on my journal, drawing monsters, doing something that is about me and my creativity. And sometimes that's just reading, or it's just kind of resting, because I think that has to be part of our practice as well. If we just try to do it every day and grind it out, then it's like sometimes we just need a break. So anyway, I kind of want to get back into, this is a new year. I mean, we're already into February, but I wanted to get back into making videos and doing live streaming. And so yeah, my plan was to do this all live stream, but unfortunately here I am making the video, but I'm going to pretend that it's live streaming. I just won't have any feedback from anybody, and won't be able to answer any questions that folks might have as they watch this. But I wanted to go ahead and do the video. And today I'm just going to kind of work in my journal. Like I said, I had projects. I was like, that September 30-day challenge, the Monster a Day challenge, and here most recently my Monsters a Gathering Space project. I like giving myself projects like that, but what I find is that it's like you get into it and you're like, okay, after a few days it starts to get a little bit monotonous. So I really want to mix up my daily practice and not have it always be like the exact same or very similar thing. So today's about working on my journal, and I've done that in December and I think into January, where just kind of looking at my journal and trying to share some of the things that I do in there. So that's what I'm going to do today. So if you want to kind of grab your art materials and make along, this is not a tutorial. This is just me kind of talking about my process as I kind of go through my journal. So anyway, let me go ahead and switch it over so you can not look at me and look at my journal. So here's my journal. I don't have any stickers on the cover. Most of my journals have stickers, But this was the journal that I started almost a year ago. Actually, I started it back in May when I first started teaching classes online. And so this became sort of my demo journal for my online classes. And I mean, usually I put like an intro page, like an I am page, but I haven't even done any of this stuff in the cover. But I started this journal, like I said, when I started teaching online workshops way back in May. And I taught a whole bunch of workshops in the spring and over the summer and a few in the fall. And I've really kind of tapered those off now, but this is just kind of an accumulation of all those classes. There is some kind of work outside of the classes as well, but not that much. I mean, I have gone back in and I have reworked pages and I've added things, but that's kind of what I'm focusing on now. So I used it primarily for my classes and my workshops, and now is whenever I'm kind of going back and really trying to add. So what I want to like really draw your attention to is the fact that some of these pages and spreads up here look kind of resolved, and then you get to something like this where I wouldn't call this finished or complete or resolved. I don't like that word completed and or even that word finished. I don't think journal spreads are ever really finished, but they kind of feel resolved, like, you know, it's okay if they stopped there. So like I said, I mean, a lot of these pages here in the beginning, this isn't, feel a little bit more resolved, feel like they've been kind of fleshed out. This one definitely has not. But this is what I do. I sit down and I flip through. And what I'm looking for is just a spread, a page that kind of grabs me. So yeah, I'm passing some of these up that look kind of unresolved and unfinished because they're not grabbing me yet. And so I flip through, and like I said, I'm looking for a space that I'm just like, okay, yeah, I want to do something. Like this was a spread that I did a while back, and I did that. I looked through it and was like, oh, I want to do something. And so this is sort of the touched up version, the kind of reworked version. But you know, something like this, you know, there's a lot of potential, but not really feeling it. This spread feels a little bit more resolved. This one, not so resolved, but I don't know if I want to work on it today. So I just kind of flipped through. Like I said, a lot of this was done in workshops and in classes, and just flipping through to find a space that I want to work on. And it's a space that I want to work on a lot. So sometimes I'll find a space and I'll just spend a few minutes and add stuff. But this is something where I'm like, I really want to like sink my teeth into it. I really want to be able to add quite a bit to it. So that's the first task. And I've done a lot of work, like I said, a lot of things in here from those classes. You know, I keep looking at this. These are blind contour drawings of my hand. I keep looking at this, so maybe I'll come back. I'm going to just kind of leave my hand in there. But, you know, it's like I've got all these spaces, all these things in here. But, yeah, I'm just looking for that space that sort of says, yeah, work on me today. And it's more of an intuitive thing. I'm not like, oh, well, you know, let me start a new page. And that's the whole idea, is I don't want to start a new page. I have all these pages in here that I've begun, and I'm like, okay, I want to do something with these. So this is another space that I started working on it and haven't really done much with it since then, but it's another potential space. So you notice how like the pages are getting a lot more spread out. There's not a whole lot going on some of these. That's a blind contour of my face. But even something like this has a lot of potential. Think about that. With some of these spaces, I'm just like, I don't know what I'm going to do with them. I just don't have any like inclination of like, oh, I could do something with it. And so I just pass those over, and I'll come back to them. So again, some spaces are a little bit more resolved than others. Some are kind of empty. So there's still more that I have, but I think what I'll do is I think I'll go back. I think I want to go back to one of these spaces. So the question is which one? And I'm feeling like either this one or this one. This one already has a lot going on, but it could be kind of interesting to do more to this. So yeah, I think I'll go ahead and work with this. And so I've done a little bit, did the drawing, I did some painting. I have the book pages where I was doing a little bit of found poetry in it. Let me go ahead and pull out my supplies. I love small things of watercolor. So I've got the core watercolor set, and then I have the Derwent Inktense set. I actually have 2 of these, and there ends up being 24 different colors. I'm going to pull out my big brush. Now I have a hole here, and so if I don't want to get any paint on or anything on the other side, I've got a scrap piece of paper that can go in there, and then that way it won't get where I don't want it to go. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just start with some paint. It's just, okay, what color? That's the other thing. This is a red oxide, kind of a reddish brown color. I think I want more of a yellowish color. So if you've ever seen me work in journals or work on artwork, or you've watched some of my videos or some of my live streams, you probably know that I am somebody who does not work in a linear fashion in my journal. And especially whenever I was teaching, I jumped around a lot because I was demonstrating different ideas and different techniques. And so a lot of times it's nice to have very specific spaces for those types of things. So that's kind of why this book has just so much in it that's kind of started but never really resolved. Like I was saying, I don't really like that word completed. I think it was Picasso that says that artwork is never finished. It only stops in interesting places. So I mean, there's always things that you can think of, like, oh, I could still do this, or I could still do that. Now this book is just a sketchbook, so the paper's kind of thin, and you can kind of see like through here where some of the color from the other side of the page is showing through. So some of this blue and green. And some of that might show through even after it dries, but when it dries, it's not as noticeable. And so I'm going to use my hairdryer. And just so that you don't have to turn down your volume, I'm going to go ahead and mute myself. And then I'll just dry it, and then I'll move on. Okay, I just realized that I was muted, and, and you couldn't tell, but I was talking. I always forget that. Well, I don't always, but I've often forgot that. So, what I was saying is that I picked up my Inktense pencil. So these are just water-soluble pencils, and they're just like watercolor pencils, but they're the Derwent Inktense, and they're more like a water-soluble ink. But I just call them watercolor pencils because that's easier to say. And I was just saying how, like, with the shapes here, I was just kind of going with my intuition again, trusting my gut. With the circle here, I was like, oh, well, I have a circle, so let's go ahead and do a circle. Maybe I want to do another circle. So oftentimes, by just working in a very intuitive way, just really thinking like, oh, what color am I going to use? You know, I mean, I have my pouch full of 30 pencils, and it's like, well, which one? Well, it's not choosing a random one, but it's just sort of thinking like, oh, well, which one is my gut? Which one is my intuition sort of telling me to choose? So I just picked the orange. And so oftentimes we can get kind of stuck with what we're doing because we have too many choices, so too many colors to choose from, or like what comes next. Like, I don't know what I'm going to do after the orange pencil, other than I know I'll take my paintbrush and spread it out, but after that I don't know. So I'm just kind of working in that very intuitive way. So again, take my paintbrush, and I can just spread that out. The Inktense are a very bright, intense color. That's another reason why I like them. But they're very similar to Derwent's regular watercolor pencils and Prismacolor watercolor pencils. But they're a high quality brand, and often you do get what you pay for. But you could still get some really interesting effects even just using Crayola watercolor pencils. They're not going to be as bright and as intense as these, but they can still work. Alright, that brush is a little big for what I'm going to do next. So I get a smaller brush. Just find it's a little bit easier to do the circles with a smaller, narrower brush. And then once again, go ahead and use my hair dryer, and hopefully I'll remember to unmute myself. Okay, so as I was drawing it, that's when I was kind of thinking about like, oh, what to do next. And I've got a couple ideas, and I think the first one, let me grab a pen. So I was just kind of thinking like, oh, I could do something with a pen. So I like the circles, but I want to draw a little bit more attention to them. So I just grabbed a red pen, and then I think I'll add an outline around. So I'm going to thicken that line a little bit, and so that's going to take a little while. And I often think about how art is sort of this movement or this back and forth between sort of what I call high payoff techniques and more subtle kind of techniques. And thinking about the paint that I painted and the orange Inktense, those are what I would consider kind of like high payoff. You know, they can change the feel of a page. They can change the look. They can change the design or composition of a page in a relatively kind of small amount of time. And I feel like there are a lot of artists that's kind of all they do. You know, it's like their artwork is all about sort of these quick, high payoff kind of techniques. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I just I find myself sort of shifting back and forth. And so now kind of going to these circles, I mean, just look how that circle stands out. I mean, compare it to the other ones. You know, so all of a sudden you're just kind of drawn to that, like almost like a bullseye. But it takes time. So if I were to just quickly draw this in, you know, it'd be a thin line. And it's not as impactful. I mean, you can barely see that. And so it has to be a thicker line. And then you might be thinking like, oh, we'll just use a thicker pen. And it's like, well, this kind of pen, I don't have a thicker one. They make a thicker one, but I just don't have one right now. But I think there's just something about slowing down and sort of finding this rhythm. You know, so you have the quick kind of energetic high payoff ones where you're kind of moving fast and things are developing fast, and then it's like, oh, let me slow down now. Let me kind of back off. Oops. Let me back it off and do something that takes a little bit more time. And what I find is that sometimes during this time, like whenever I'm slowing down, that's when the ideas can build. That's when I can really give thought to what I'm doing. When you're working very fast, yeah, you're relying a lot on your intuition. I'm relying a lot on just making those quick decisions. But when you slow down, it's like you're sitting with the work longer. You can focus on something for a longer period of time. And then, you know, I'm not really thinking about, oh, what does this piece mean, or, you know, what my next step is going to be. But it's more just kind of sitting and allowing everything that I'm doing to kind of turn over in my mind. That notion of keeping it in the back of your mind and just letting it sort of tumble around in there. It's like when we go for a walk or we're mowing the yard. I don't know if you can hear my cat meowing. She has this habit of being outside my door. Not necessarily wanting in. She just kind of has this very mournful cry. But, yeah, so just, this is kind of like, taking a walk or mowing the yard, where it doesn't take a whole lot of conscious thought to do that. You don't really have to think a whole lot about mowing the yard whenever you're pushing the lawnmower or riding the tractor, and so your mind is kind of free to think about other things. And sometimes we get kind of breakthrough ideas at those times. And so that's why I kind of feel like with this, when we slow down and just sort of give our mind something that we can focus on without a lot of conscious thought, we sort of give our mind that space and that time to just mull things over. It's like these marks tend to, they're slower, they're more methodical, but they don't take a whole lot of conscious thought. So I'm free just to let my mind wander a bit. Now right now I'm having a hard time doing that because I'm talking. But if I was sitting here and not making a recording, I'd really just be sort of mulling over the page, thinking about what the meaning is, thinking about what my next steps are. Now, one issue that I have with this thinner paper is that it kind of buckles, and I wouldn't say really wrinkles, but it buckles a lot with the watercolor. So, I mean, it's sketch paper, so it's not really meant for all the mixed media stuff, but I like using the sketchbooks because there's a lot of pages in it. And, if it's a good paper, the paint and stuff really doesn't bleed through too much. But because of how thin it is, it doesn't lay flat. And whenever I'm trying to draw with the pen, sometimes that can be a bit of a hindrance, and I hit these like little peaks and valleys sometimes. So if you see me kind of holding, with my fingers really close, I'm trying to flatten the paper to make it a little bit easier to draw. So again, I like how the red makes those shapes pop out. But right now, everything's they're just kind of floating there. So I want to connect them. So I think what I'll do is physically connect them with a line. And I think with these, instead of doing a single line, I'm going to do a series of thin stripes. So these are going to be kind of those slower, more intentional marks. Give me some time to think about what I'm doing. Think about what my next steps are going to be. And it's like, that's real subtle. It doesn't make a big visual impact like the thicker lines. All right. So before I did the red lines, I said that I had a couple ideas. The red lines were one of the ideas. The other idea is I feel like I want to have some more collage. The book pages really sort of melt into the page because I've worked on top of them. But I want something to kind of stand out, and maybe it's, even though this is a single spread, I'm kind of feeling like there's two sides to it, and so I think I want to divide it, and I'm feeling like I want to put like a vertical line right here. I could draw that in, but I think I'm going to do it with one of my favorites, and that is using maps. So I've got this map from an atlas, and I'm going to cut some strips from it and use the strips. And then I'll create a line with the matte paper. So a lot of times with collage, I think we feel like, oh, you're going to cut and glue a picture down, or you're going to cut out a shape and glue it down. But we can kind of think about collage and use it in a very linear way too. So I try to keep them pretty consistent. So yeah, I'm going to need the third one, but I think that's going to work. And then I've got this old pad. Again, if you've tuned in before, you've probably seen this before. It's a little curled, but this is just had some blank paper in it, and I just use it as a glue pad. So I use my Uhu stick. It's my favorite glue. It's the glue that I always use and go to for this kind of stuff. If I was working with acrylic paints, I would use acrylic medium. Now this was blue. It has kind of turned white, but it still works. And so what I do is I just take the piece of collage I'm going to glue down and stick it on the pad. And that way I can spread glue all over it. Yeah, for some reason this pad, the pages have curled. Not really sure why. But it keeps my journal and my workspace glue free for the most part. Okay. So it's pretty subtle, especially over here. Kind of blends in with the dark lines, but that's all right. Now I think I want to use some more of that my Inktense pencils, and I might end up going on top of these. So I am going to hit them with my hair dryer. I know a lot of people probably kind of think like, why would you want to, you glued them in with a glue stick. It's like, aren't they dry? And it's like, well, the glue's not totally dry, and if I feel, I can actually feel how the strips are a little bit cooler than the page around it, because there is a little bit of water content in that glue stick. So I'm going to hit it with a hair dryer, and then that way it's going to stick better. I've found that if I dry it with a hair dryer and then paint over it, it doesn't peel off as much, because this glue stick is water soluble, and so you can wash up with warm water and soap. But if I paint over that, sometimes it will peel off a little bit, and I just find if I make sure it's really dry, it peels off a lot less. So let me go ahead and mute. Alright, so that just kind of helps that glue, like I said, dry and hopefully not move as much. So I want to use the Inktense pencil again, and I'm going to find one of my favorite colors. Actually, it's what I used over here already. So I did this a while back, but I know exactly what color that is. It's one of my favorite colors, and I think I'm going to need to get a new pencil soon. Actually, I have one over and that's ready, but this one still has a little bit of life left. This is called Shiraz, and it's a kind of a reddish brownish color. I'm going to sharpen this. I do have an electric sharpener, so you'll hear that. It's almost too small to fit into the electric sharpener. So anyway, I'm thinking I want to add color, but I don't want to add a lot of like shapes or textures so much. So I think what I'm going to do, I want to really kind of pull this line of maps out. So I'm going to shade kind of like right next to the map line. And you can kind of see how that dark mark really just kind of makes it pop out. But then I'm going to shade it out a little bit so it kind of get lighter as I move away. And this is the same technique that I used around the squares and around the circles. The nice thing with the water soluble pencils is I don't have to be super neat about it and very careful. The water will blend it. Okay. So I think over here I want to have some of this color, but I just kind of want to have more of a solid color, more kind of like the paint in the background. But I don't have this Shiraz as a paint, so if I kind of shade it and kind of do crisscrosses. So I'm holding the pencil underneath my hand so I can use the side of the tip, the side of the point, and just kind of crisscross and trying to get just some darker areas and kind of very organic, not really worrying about trying to fill in or cover up an entire area. And so what that's going to do is going to give me some darker spots and some lighter spots. I can come down here in between my squares, come down here and go off the edge of the page. And then we'll see what that's like. So I'm going to leave that out and maybe come back to it. So since this is a straight line, I'm going to go ahead and turn to my big brush. And of course I'm going to use my big brush over here because that's a big area. And I just take this, put it right into the pencil, and then just brush it out and kind of spread that out. And so as I spread it out, it gets lighter because basically the color's is getting used up in the brush. But if I dip it in the water, that will dilute the color even more. So then that way I can get a nice gradation. So it's going to go from darker to lighter as it goes away from that line. So what that'll do is that color's over here. So that's going to sort of tie in sort of all three areas. Even though I have that with the yellow and the orange and that red oxide that I used before, but that's just going to kind of help. And then whenever I do it over here, you can kind of see how it is that kind of a reddish, wine kind of color. So by dipping it in the water, I can really dilute the color that's in the brush and really just spread it out so that it fades out into the page. And also I need water on the brush in order to activate the pencil. So if I don't have enough water, it's not going to spread it. So that water really just soaks into that page, and it's hard to tell exactly what it's going to look like. I mean, you can see how much it's soaked through the back, and some of that might stay on the back, but you know, that's okay. It's part of the process. I know that because of the thin paper. But let's go ahead and mute, and I'm going to go ahead and use the hairdryer. All right, so you know that dried. It's looking pretty good. Um, you may have noticed when I flipped it over, some of that yellow and orange and that Shiraz color has kind of come through a little bit, but I really don't mind that. So anyway, so I've come to a point where I'm just sort of like, oh, I'm not really sure what to do next. I feel like I want to have something in here. I don't know if I want to go in with a pen yet and maybe make some of these lines bolder in the blind contour drawing that's there. That might be something that I'll do. Kind of feels like, you know, kind of pull out some of those lines, but yeah, I don't know yet. So yeah, I've gotten to a point where, okay, what can I do next? And it might be something where I'm going to kind of trust my intuition, but I think with this one I'm just going to kind of stop because I feel like I've reached sort of a dead end. I am thinking I might bring in some of the book pages and put in here, or maybe even just words. I feel like maybe pick out some of these words, maybe write them big, or I don't know, somehow put words over here. Kind of feeling that. So I'm not 100% sure, but that kind of means that it's a good place to stop because I can come back to it later. And I really just kind of want to keep this to about an hour, so we're getting close to that hour mark. So I'm going to go ahead and, like I said, just sort of not call this finished, not call this completed, but just sort of, okay, it's stopped for now. I'll come back to it in the future, maybe next time, maybe in a month, who knows. So anyway, so yeah, I mean, I don't try to focus on having a finished page or having a finished work of art whenever I sit down, especially with this daily practice. What I've noticed is that, you know, artwork gets completed, gets finished, gets resolved as you work on it. And it's amazing how just a little bit of time each day adds up, and next thing you know, you've got lots of little things or lots of big things kind of done. So with the journal, I just have so many pages in it that I've started something because of the workshops that I'm like, okay, I want to work, I want to add, I want to build, I want to resolve more of these spaces. So, I feel like this spread is a little bit more resolved. There's more going on in it now than there was, but yeah, I'm going to come back to it, and I'll work on it, and I'll add more to it in the future. And that's the nice thing. That's what I like about the journal, and that's why I bounce around a lot, because I just never know what's going to grab me, what's going to say, hey, come work on me today, or come add something here. So anyway, I appreciate you tuning in. If you stayed engaged this entire time, and hopefully I'll be able to bring live streams back to you in the future. So anyways, thank you so much. Really appreciate you tuning in. Really appreciate you watching. And if you have any questions, any comments, feel free to put them in the comments below. I'll share this video on social media as well. So, if you haven't, make sure, subscribe, hit that subscribe button. And then, of course, I'm on social media. So check me out on Instagram or on Facebook. And yeah, thank you so much, and hope you enjoyed it. And as always, happy creating. Oops, hit the wrong one.